Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. In today's video I'm going to be trying out an idea I had to print out a picture of some water onto water slide decal paper and then put it into my resin coasters. I did encounter a bit of an issue with this idea and you will see what happened, but to rectify the problem that occurred, which was my own fault, I might add, I added some waves on the top. So if you would like to see how I achieved that wave effect on the top of the coasters, keep watching and you will find out just what it was that I used to create that lovely effect. Today's video is a collaboration with Live Sleep Resin. I haven't done a collaboration in ages, so this makes a nice change. We decided to have water as our theme. And I know that Chantal at Live Sleep Resin has something really interesting planned. I don't know exactly what, but yeah, it's got me intrigued. So please pop on over to her channel. She's got quite a new channel and she needs all the support she can get. All newbies need that extra little bit of support, so I'd really appreciate it if you could pop by and have a look to see what she creates. With that said, let's get on with my project. I'd decided I wanted to make some coasters, but it was all a little bit too predictable. I wanted to be a bit different and try something different. If you know me by now, that's the kind of thing that I like to do. And so I had a think and thought, what about if I find a photograph of some water and print it onto a water slide decal and put that into the coaster, just to try something different. And so I went onto Unsplash, I think it's unsplash.com, and there you can get free downloads of pictures, which is really great because not much is free these days. And so, yeah, I went on to Unsplash and I found the picture that you can see there on the left. And it's by somebody called Silas Beish. I'm sorry if that's the wrong pronunciation, but I'm trying my best. And it's his photograph. And so I downloaded that and printed it onto water slide decal paper for inkjet printers. And it's the clear one. You can get it with a white background or you can get it clear. Oh, and before printing it, I actually cropped it on my iPad into the correct sized circle, which is 9.8 millimeters in diameter. I can't give you instructions for that because I had to follow a YouTube tutorial myself. I'm not great with that kind of thing. But you don't have to crop it. You can just cut the full picture out and, draw a circle and then cut it out. Next, because I used an inkjet printer, I needed to seal it and I used Krylon triple thick crystal clear glaze for that. I did 3 coats, but I allowed it to dry completely between each coat. Anyway, I put that aside because we don't need that yet. The first job is to add a base layer to your coasters, and I decided to have it white so that just like with when you saw the picture with the white paper behind it, the picture stood out really well. So I thought it needed that white behind the picture. And the thing is, I thought about using opaque pigment and just making it a flat white. But then I thought there wouldn't be much dimension to it. So I used white mica powder and made it quite thick with the white, but just enough so that the light could still come through. And just ignore the blue at the bottom of the jug. That's just old resin. I like to reuse my jug again and again, and I can't always get the old resin out. Anyway, I'm giving it a really good mix, and as you can see, it's fairly dark, but not opaque. I wanted it to glitter and glisten in the light, just like water would. And so I had this pot of shaved ice, it's called. It's just like a big chunky glitter, and it worked really well for this. I needed to use quite a lot. I would normally use my Sahara glitters because they're so good, but I didn't have enough, so that's why I used this. And like I said, it worked really well, and I'm just mixing it in, ready for the next step. The resin which I'm using for this is transparent resin from Resin Pro, and I've mixed up 200 grams, which works just right for this coaster mould which I'm going to be using. So this mould is from Moulds and Shapes, and I love it to bits. I'm so pleased that I discovered them. I've got quite a lot of their moulds now because I just love the quality so much. And so, yeah, oh, and they ship pretty much worldwide. I don't think it's every country. I think there's a handful of countries they don't ship to, but pretty much worldwide. And yeah, it's definitely worth a look. I've got a discount code in the description if you're interested. So all I did was I poured the mixture in. I left about 1 millimetre, maybe 2 millimetres, I'm not quite sure, at the top, just so that there was enough space for the top coat after I've applied my water slide decal. Okay, it's the next day and my resin had cured and it was time for the decals. First job was to cut them out. They'd had plenty of time to dry because I'd done it the day before. And yeah, just carefully cut them out. Take your time because any bits where you go wonky, it will show up. Okay, so what you're going to need is a bowl of water, and it needs to be lukewarm. That you'll see in a few minutes that that was my mistake. I used cold water because it was there from my practice the day before and I was being lazy, and that was a big mistake. Because the water was too cold, I had to hold the decal in the water for quite a long time before it would start to slide off the backing paper, and that ended up causing my decal to wrinkle. Yeah, I was gutted, absolutely gutted, but I'll talk more about that in a moment. So what you do is you keep it in the water. It should take about 30 seconds, but for me it took longer because my water was too cold. And you keep checking it until it starts to slide off the backing paper, and once it does, you start to slide it onto your resin, onto your coaster. So as you can see here, I've just got the first bit slid off. I nearly said slided, that's not a word, is it? Slid off, and I'm holding it down and pulling back the white backing paper, and then it will just start to, I don't know exactly how it works, whether it's kind of a glue that's on the back, don't really know, but it will start to adhere after a while, but it does take a while, so you've got time to move it around. And it was at this stage that I started to see that it had started to wrinkle a little bit, and I tried to smooth it out with a wet cotton bud, but it wasn't having it. And the thing is, you can't be too rough with it because otherwise you start to rub off the varnish and the ink. So there wasn't a lot that I could do, and that was all because my water was too cold. But you won't make that mistake, will you? Because you've just seen me make the mistake for you. So I'm not too worried about mistakes because I know it helps you. So any bubbles that I could see, I just gently squeezed them to the edge. If there was any air pockets trapped underneath, really gently. I'm not rubbing, I'm kind of tapping with my finger until it reaches the edge, and then the air can come out. If you rub, like I said, you'll start rubbing off the print, and you don't want that. So I repeated the process for all 4 of them, still with cold water. And I bet you're thinking, why didn't you learn after the first one, Louise? Why did you carry on making the same mistake? Well, to be quite honest with you, I didn't know what I'd done wrong until afterwards when I thought about it and thought, well, the one I'd done the day before in the lukewarm water didn't wrinkle. And then I worked it out, which was a shame. If I'd realised straight away why they'd started to wrinkle, you know, I would have gone and changed my water, but I didn't. Anyway, I repeated the process for all 4, and I'm only going to show you the 2 because it's just the same thing 4 times. After applying all 4 decals, I left them to dry for about 3 hours. It needs to be completely dry, obviously, before you add your resin. At this stage, I was fairly sure that my coasters were completely messed up, but I wouldn't give up. And I thought, let's add the next layer. Let's just carry on, because you never know. The next layer might disguise the problem with the surface texture that we've got. And so I mixed up a little bit more resin and did that top layer. Do you remember at the beginning when I said that the diameter of the images was 9.8 centimetres? Well, the coasters are 10 centimetres, and the reason I did it a little bit smaller was so that there was a slight gap around the edges for the resin to adhere to the resin underneath. I didn't want the image going right up to the edge and then the resin on top, almost like the decal would be like a sandwich filling, if you get what I mean. And I thought maybe the coaster wouldn't be strong and it might split into 2, you know, if the decal came off the bottom layer. So that's why I left a bit of a gap around the edge so that the resin on the top could adhere to the resin underneath the decal around the edges. I really hope that makes sense. Sometimes I kind of get tied in knots with my own words. Right, the resin cured and I could see that there was still a massive problem, and I demolded them. I didn't bother filming it because at that stage I thought, this isn't going to make it to the video. There's no chance it can be a video. One of them was okay, and the rest had the wrinkles really visible. And some of you might think, oh, well, it's fine, but I couldn't live with it. I really couldn't. So I painted the edges with my Pilot silver pen anyway, just to see if I could make it look better. Like you do, you try to see if you can save these things, but I still wasn't happy. So I put them to a side, and they remained on the side of my table for a few days, and then I thought to myself, what about if I can cover up those wrinkles and just do like a wave over the top? And so that was my plan, to try and save the lives of these coasters, which, if they'd have worked, would have been great just as they were. Before adding the waves to my coasters, I got a little bit of liquid latex and covered the backs of my coasters with that to protect them from any drips that would come down. If you don't have liquid latex, don't worry, you can use Vaseline, petroleum jelly, or you can use masking tape. I don't really like to use masking tape because I find that the resin seeps underneath, and then cleaning the bottom of your coasters becomes a real pain. Before you add your resin wave, it's really important to make sure each coaster is level. Now, I've had problems with this before. You can make sure your table is level, or you have like a tray underneath which is level, but then when you put your coasters on whatever you're putting them onto, they're not always level, and your waves go all over the place. So what I did was I used 4 little balls of air dry clay, which I had. It was old and it was dry, but it was good enough for using for this purpose. And I put them under each coaster and then individually made sure each coaster was level. And I found that worked far better than levelling my work surface and just putting a pot or an upside down cup or something under the coaster to elevate it. It's just, you know, you can't guarantee it's going to work properly doing it that way. So I really liked doing it the way it was the first time I tried using the clay like that, and it really did work, and it was great that each coaster was level and the resin stayed exactly where I wanted it to be. Okay, so the resin which I've mixed up and I'm starting to apply here is Art Pro Deluxe resin from Resin Pro. It's extra thick, and I found that this works really well for doing the wave effect. If you don't have a really thick resin, you can use your regular resin and let it sit for a while and allow it to thicken up. Just be careful that it doesn't overheat. So I'm just applying the resin over the top part of the image where most of the wrinkles were, with the, you know, because I wanted that lovely sun dappled effect at the bottom to still be visible. So luckily all the wrinkles were on that dark part where, you know, it was easy to just cover it with a wave. So I was lucky in that respect. Right, for my white pigment, I'm using Wave Pro from Resin Pro, and it's a white powder which is specifically designed for creating cells and the lacing effect in waves. So yeah, that's called Wave Pro, and it's really good. It's 1:8, 1 part powder to 8 parts resin. So I mixed 16 grams of resin and added 2 grams of the Wave Pro into that and mixed it all up really, really well. Then I used my mini silicone spatula just to apply a thin line, well, thinnish, reasonably thin, not too thin, not too thick, thin line of it along the bottom of where I'd placed my clear resin. Then I used my decorator's heat gun to blow the white forwards to create the wave effect. You start at one corner and just move it along. You can't quite see on this one, but you will for the next ones. So yeah, you start it off on one corner, and then once it starts to move, glide your heat gun to the right or the left, whichever you start from, and you know, that's it really. You need the decorator's heat gun rather than, you know, like an embossing gun, because it blows harder. I just find it works a lot better. So I did exactly the same thing for the other 3 coasters. And one thing I didn't mention is once you've blown it with the heat gun, if you've got a kitchen torch, go over it very lightly straight afterwards with the kitchen torch, and that really helps the cells to appear. Once they'd cured, I liked them, but they were a little bit wishy-washy on the edges. I wanted a little bit more definition, so I just took my white Posca marker and just did a white line along the edge of the wave, and I found that it just defined it a little bit more and helped the wave to pop from the overall look, if you get what I mean. I found that it did help. Maybe you might think it was a mistake to use that. You know, it was a little bit of a gamble. I thought, is this going to look really naff when I started doing it? But I applied it and I thought, yeah, I actually like that. That's got a really good effect. So I was glad that I did that. It just gave it a little bit more sharpness. Right then, so once my marker had dried, I gave it a final coat of resin, and you know, before I did that, I put some more silver on the edges just to freshen it up, because they'd been through quite an ordeal. So had I. So I added some more silver, and yeah, then I added my clear resin. This is the Art Pro Deluxe again, which is really good for coating. Now, really, as these are coasters, it should really have a heat-resistant coating on the top of that. But I'll be completely honest with you, I'd reached my limit. I was ready to give up. at this point. The coasters, it had become a coaster marathon. So much work going into saving the life of those coasters. But you know, in the end, I really loved the way they turned out, and I was glad that I'd gone to that extra effort to save them, rather than just putting them in my pile of ones that have failed, because I don't like to throw things away, and I end up with a pile of things that I don't know what I'm going to do with. So at least I've saved them from going into that pile. So yeah, as I said, ideally you would want a heat resistant coating on the top, and I will do that, but I was ready to call it a day and get my video edited. I use Heat Pro from Resin Pro for my top coating. And it does need a layer of clear resin underneath it. That's why I couldn't just add the heat resistant coating straight on top of that wave, because sometimes it reacts to certain pigments, and I had a feeling that my heat resistant coating might react with the white that was in that wave. So it definitely needed a layer of clear resin before adding the Heat Pro heat resistant resin. So here we have the finished coasters, well, finished apart from that Heat Pro coating that I need to do. But I do love the way they turned out, and I love the sun dappled effect you get from the photograph that went in there. I think that's quite a good way of cheating to create a really good effect. And yeah, I was really pleased I had a go at that. And despite the problems, it did turn out well in the end. So that's it for today. I really hope my mistakes have been useful to you, and I hope you've been a little bit inspired by the water slide decal idea. Don't forget to pop on by to check out what Live Sleep Resin came up with for her part of the collaboration. And if you haven't already subscribed and you would like to do so, please do, and give my video the thumbs up, and it will really help my channel to grow. Thank you for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.